Matty Fresh on the track up estate. And I'm bringing to you live my boys Alec and Nate, Tequila Ty, Jay, Nelly, and Zillin in the building. So kick it back, pour the drink. We chillin' because I'm boozing and betting and ballin' like I'm 2-6 in the blue kicks. Watch me move quick. Yeah, this the blueprint. So who's getting involved? Welcome into the show. This is Booze, Bets, and Ball, baby.
And welcome back into the show. I said we try to get creative during the summer months to keep things interesting, and I thought this was a great opportunity for us to bring an outsider's perspective on Penn State football this upcoming season into play. When we normally have people on, it's Landon, people like that, people just around the Penn State program. So wanted to get a little bit of a more broader look at things. And Sam from College Football with Sam was number one guy, wanted to get on the show. So Sam, good to talk to you again. Before we start, just kind of tell people a little bit about you and where they could find your stuff.
Well, thank you for having me on, Alec. I appreciate it a lot. And you guys can find me just by searching up College Football with Sam on X or YouTube. It's right there. It's the first thing really that pops up, that, black and gold logo. And I started doing this in 2020. During COVID, I was just bored, so I started talking behind a mic and learning about college football. And then in 2021, really in the summer months, I started doing it consistently. And now here we are. We just crossed 23,000 subscribers, and nice. The look of the channel is completely different, and it's awesome.
Yeah, it does look good. I did notice that. That's awesome that you got all those upgrades going on. All right, so I think to get the full picture here, we have to start with Penn State's run from kind of the second half of last season through the Orange Bowl, because a lot of people would look at it and say, that's a typical Penn State run right there. Beat up on all the teams they were supposed to. And then we talk about Oregon in the Big Ten championship game, and then Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl. They, did all the little things wrong and lost the two games against teams that you would look at as better or equal to them. Did it feel that way to you? Like it was the same old Penn State, or did it look like there was an added gear towards the end there? Because I know we felt like there was, but we couldn't tell if we were a little biased about that, or did it look like Penn State maybe hit a stride towards the end there and it wasn't a fluke or anything, or same old? It was something that looked a little different.
It's a good question, and I think you could take either side and back it up with evidence. I felt like at the end of last year, the team had a potential to them that they didn't in prior seasons. I think most of that was the offense and the run game, and Aller performing better overall. You saw it in the passer rating and the QBR. He had the best season of a Penn State QB probably since Trace McSorley. And Abdul Carter was really good. The defense clearly wasn't, at the end of the year, it was very clear that it wasn't the unit that it was in 23, but the offense was way better. The success rate, the points scored, the fact that, they were able to put 37 on Oregon, and that they registered 24 points on mostly sustainable drives without a single catch from a wide receiver against Notre Dame would probably tell you, they got way better on offense. I don't think they ever really found that gear in totality in their big games. So against Oregon, they found the offense, but the defense couldn't stop a nosebleed. Or against Notre Dame, it looked like towards the end of the first half that maybe, they're just going to dominate Notre Dame. They're up 10-0. And then it kind of just slips away. And you have the busted coverage that really reminded me of, speaking of Jim Knowles, it reminded me of in 2022 when Ohio State played Georgia. The safety fell down. Georgia's wide receiver just runs straight to the end zone. It kind of felt like that play where it's like, I don't think the team who just gave that up is going to win. So I think they have that. I think they showed potential that they didn't beforehand. And I love that. But what I didn't love is it felt like they couldn't put it together.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the one thing that a lot of Penn State fans are looking for this year. Like, could they finally put it together? I know you're a little less talented on defense, but we think it's an improvement at defensive coordinator. I know, a lot of people just say, well, why'd you invest so much in the defensive coordinator? But just kind of starting there, as someone who's not an Ohio State fan, not a Penn State fan, what does Jim Knowles going from not even a week after winning the national championship with Ohio State and going to Penn State, what does that look like, and what kind of like eyebrows does that raise as someone with no dog in that fight?
It was extremely shocking to me. I remember reading the first actual reporter breaking the story.
Mm-hmm.
And I sent it to a trusted friend of mine who is, very involved in football, very connected, gambles and wins a lot of money, and like just he could run a college football show if he wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
He could. Like he's that caliber of excellent. And he didn't believe me. He thought that it was like fake and based on rumors.
Mm-hmm.
And then Thamel reports it. Everyone else begins to report it. And it's just like the floodgates open. And okay, I guess Penn State earned their first win over Ohio State in like a decade. And it wasn't even
Pretty
on
much.
the field. It was in like a coaching move that's unprecedented. It was shocking to me. I was kind of the opinion that Penn State bringing everyone back would put them in the position to compete for it all.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't very confident in that when Allen was still there. Then when he left, I thought that they would definitely make an upgrade, so I became more confident. And then when they got Knowles, that's when I thought, yeah, this team is going to be number one, and I don't think it's going to be particularly close. So it was a big move.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, a lot of what the pushback was is, invest, and people that think the coaching salary pool and what you have to spend in NIL is somehow connected, like that's all the same money. It's not. So a lot of people are like, why don't you just spend more money on a receiver or something? Like your defense is fine. Well, I thought this was a great opportunity for them to make sure the defense did not become an issue. And also, I mean, Jim Knowles has absolutely dominated them on the field the past couple of years. Just getting him away from Ohio State. And I know Andy Kotelnicki in particular also struggled with him when they were both in the Big 12. So yeah. I do think that, there's a lot more into this than Penn State just trying to break even at defensive coordinator.
Yeah, and they're not breaking even. I mean,
right.
Penn State in 2023, for example, I thought had a more talented unit than Ohio State did defensively.
Mm-hmm.
But Ohio State's defense was, I would go as far to say, significantly better, even with Diaz being Penn State's DC, because Knowles is just that good.
Yeah.
And then you saw this past year where I think Penn State had the more talented D line, and yet you saw the clear coaching juxtaposition between Tom Allen, and the unit kind of got worse as the year went on, I thought. And then Jim Knowles' Ohio State unit, which just kept hitting strides and hitting strides and hitting strides. And they didn't have an Abdul Carter. And they had Caleb Downs, but they didn't have like an Abdul Carter on the D line, and yet you could not move that unit, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree with that. Kind of moving on. So the one position when it comes to Penn State, and you alluded to this earlier, obviously with the Orange Bowl performance, but wide receiver was the number one thing talked about even before the Orange Bowl, definitely after the Orange Bowl and throughout the offseason. But when you look at the three additions Penn State made with Ross Hudson and Pena Late, along with bringing back, some younger promising guys like in Tyseer Denmark, some like Kobe Howard, some of these younger guys. Do you think even with losing Tyler Warren in the tight end group, that one, they did enough at receiver to at least be competent, and that this group could be good enough to get Drew Aller to another level?
I think that they have done more than enough. I think that just bringing in Hudson and Ross would have been just doing enough. I think that Pena is doing way more than enough. I mean, think of the last two teams that won it all from the Big Ten. Ohio State's wide receiver core, I mean, no one can touch. That's why they were able to win it all with some of the limitations they had, because everyone else is limited to them comparatively at wide receiver. Michigan won it all with Roman Wilson at wide receiver 1. And talent-wise and build-wise, they're probably more comparable to this Penn State team than the Ohio State team is. Trevor Pena is more of an NFL receiver than Roman Wilson is. Devontae Ross has been probably just as productive in college and is probably just as athletic. And Hudson's this really big guy who was good at USC. And I just think that USC's receiver room was so deep that he couldn't get on the field all that much. You add in Luke Reynolds, and I know this is wide receiver, not tight end, but it still plays a part. Luke Reynolds is an alien. I think that Khalil Dinkins coming back is pretty big. I think if all three of the transfers pan out, especially if one of them's Pena, I don't know who is slowing. No, you can slow down the offense, but I don't know who's stopping it. I don't think you'll have a game this year where you don't have an offensive touchdown scored. I don't even think there will be a game this year where you don't have at least 2 of them scored per game, or maybe even 3. Like, this offense was damn good last year. They were top 5 in success rate, top 6 in ESPN efficiency. It was a really productive offense. The receiver and Aller's accuracy was the issue. And I think year 2 of Kotelnicki and these really experienced and in terms of Pena and Ross, athletic and twitchy receivers, I think is really going to help him take that step forward, especially in big games.
Yeah, I do too. I just think it's a nice piece to have that they didn't last year. I know there's obviously going to be a step down at tight end. I know the Penn State tight end group gets a lot of hype with what's there, and there's a lot of quality depth to it. Andrew Rappleyea, who was actually slated to be tight end 2 last year, tears his ACL after the first game of the season. You don't see him again. I think he's kind of forgotten about too. So they have a lot of bodies there that I think, the combination can make up for some of Warren's production. You're not going to get that skill set where he was at quarterback and center and all that stuff, but at least a lot of the stats themselves can be made up for. But I think when you add in the fact that they brought back pretty much everyone from the offensive line and running back group, you already knew they were going to be able to run the ball efficiently and effectively, honestly. But now that you at least have to respect the receiving group, I think it actually makes Singleton and Allen even more dangerous. I don't know what you think about that, but I actually think Penn State being competent at other positions is going to put those guys even a step higher, because that was honestly something for Saquon, is you had to respect the receivers and the tight ends and McSorley's running ability when he was at Penn State. They didn't have the best offensive line, but there's enough around him that you had to account for other stuff. You couldn't always account for him. And I think these 2 running backs could be headed for a similar season.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I completely agree with that. I mean, I think that this is the best O-line in America solely because of actually one position on the line. I would say it's the tackle room. I think you look at Rucci, Dunco, and Shelton and how all of them had over 400 snaps last year, or at least over 300, I think. All of them had starts, and they all come back. And obviously you can't start 3 tackles. So it's unprecedented in the NIL and portal era to have that deep of a tackle room. And then Penn State, 71% of their offensive line roster are 4- and 5-star players. Think about Michigan. Michigan's not even 50%. I think they're 48% or something. Ohio State's 40%. Oregon's is 50%. Like Penn State has out-recruited everyone by eons in the Big Ten at offensive line. And probably only schools like maybe Alabama, Georgia, and Texas, and maybe Miami have recruited at their level on the O-line nationally. And then development and retaining depth is a whole different conversation. I think that this offense can absolutely flirt with being the best in the country.
Yeah, I do think just having that offensive line consistency, which Penn State has not had since maybe 2009, 2010, somewhere in there. Obviously, the 2008 group was really, really good. But just having that to rely on, I think it makes Allard's job a lot easier because people have to bring up how he's not the most mobile guy and, his footwork isn't always the best. But if he feels more comfortable in the pocket, it's going to improve his footwork too. So I think it just everyone's going to benefit from that. And it's not, I say this as Singleton and Allen are going to probably 1 and 2 on Penn State's rushing list after the season, and Allard will probably be a top 5 pick. But it's not too star heavy in the sense where you can see someone new beating a team every week. Like Pena could go for 5, 110, and 2 touchdowns. And then Ross could have a game like he had against Iowa last year. And then it could be Singleton with 3 touchdowns, or Allen goes for 200 yards. Like, I just feel like you're not reliant on 1 or 2 pieces as maybe they were in the past, especially I think about like the Dotson teams in like 2020 and 2021. But I think that is an added element too, where maybe too much of things ran through Tyler Warren last year, and now you're kind of spreading the wealth around, and that makes you even harder to defend.
Oh, absolutely. That's a great point. I mean, they have guys that I think can carry them to win, but that's what makes them more dangerous is I don't think they have to. I mean, I really love this team. You probably already know that, but I'm beyond high on this team. I kind of think they're in a tier of their own, especially if the staff plays the cards right.
Yeah. So final thing, kind of wrapping up the offseason. We liked to crown Penn State as the offseason champs this year. I know it's a running joke usually around college football about who was the offseason champ. But as someone not as intertwined with Penn State, I don't want to say were they the champs, but this offseason had to be, in your eyes, was it even near perfect? Because for us, it seemed it, but obviously we're a little diluted in our thought process with that.
I mean, if we're talking about like recruiting off-season champs, or if we're talking about, I don't know, like it's such a loaded question. But
yeah, I guess I mean more about what they loaded up for the upcoming season, not
then absolutely
the totality of the offseason.
Absolutely. They're preseason like champs. I mean, I think that look, I think this team is going to be several points better than everyone in power ratings. And there is very little holding me back from saying that this team could be better than the prior 2 title winners, because I don't think they have holes. I think that Michigan in 23 had some holes that were like the punt return game was pretty bad. And the receivers, while collegiately good, weren't collegiately great. And I think Penn State at least has like more than one guy at receiver this year who could really pop if healthy. And then Ohio State last year, like tight end and O-line were like major concerns at the end of the year. And then for a bit there, it was corner. O-line was good when it was healthy. But I look at this Penn State team and what they brought back, what they brought in, who they hired, who they retained. The only hole I see is not on the field. It's not on the field in any way. They have the running back duo like that Ohio State had last year, as close to that as you could get. They have the O-line that like Michigan had that year and the year prior. They have a D-line that I think it could be comparable if things play out. Linebackers are athletic. They have great corners. I think Harris is going to be elite this year. Definitely live up to that first round draft prediction. And they have great wide receivers. I think their biggest question, and it's one that you can't really answer in the preseason, is it's James Franklin. That's it. I think that this is the only team in college football who I think is guaranteed 10 regular season wins, and who I think is essentially then guaranteed to be in the playoff picture.
Yeah, the Franklin thing is interesting because I think we've all felt that way for a little bit. Kind of started with those Ohio State games in 17 and 18 and how they went, and then that narrative grew and has continued to do so. When I look at the Notre Dame game, I actually think he did a pretty good job and stayed out of his own way. And Drew Aller unfortunately missed some passes. Where they kicked the field goal early in the game. Singleton had a walk-in touchdown. It's a low throw. He missed Singleton on a wheel route a little later in the game on what could have been a big play, if not a touchdown. I think they called a great game. I think in terms of the calls they made, in terms of when to punt, when to kick a field goal, stuff like that, they stayed out of their own way for the most part. And my hope is, I know a lot of people just won't give them credit because of how they lost that game. My hope is that he's finally kind of had enough scars to where he's learned some things. Like, he's kind of lost in almost every way possible at this point. And I just hope that there's now enough built in there to know what's bad and what's good. And I know it's been a long time, so you'd hope so, but just kind of how I saw that Notre Dame go. And even like the Minnesota game where they came back and won in November, you saw some of that stuff. And I just think that there was definitely some growth from him towards the middle and end of last year. It's just, can he now complete those things, carry it across a full season and execute them?
Yes, absolutely. And having like a coordinator like Kotelnicki, for example, will help you with that. And I think you saw that with some of the things they did on offense against, like, I know Minnesota was technically special teams, but you have to trust Reynolds, an offensive player, to make that happen. The game they had against Oregon was, I think, called pretty well. Notre Dame, I would agree. I don't think Notre Dame was necessarily like specific play calling. I think a lot of the Oregon and Notre Dame stuff is that those two teams just had a bigger edge to them, and they did, like, not the coaches, but the players didn't beat themselves on those teams as much as they did for Penn State. I mean, my own eyes said that Penn State was better than Notre Dame last year, although the power ratings would disagree. And the power ratings said that Penn State was better than Oregon in FPI at the end of the year. So yeah, it's coaching, it's culture. I mean, hope exists. Things can change. It's not a strategy, but it exists. I will say though, him potentially learning lessons, Knowles coming on the staff, and Knowles is all about strategy. He's the best in the business at DC, and that'll help Kotelnicki too, because he's really the only DC who's ever locked down Kotelnicki. And combined with the talent that's returning and the coaching from the assistants and strength and conditioning guys, all those things aligned might make it so that, I don't know, there's a world where Franklin maybe doesn't learn his lessons and they still do well just because everything's aligning. Literally everything.
Yeah, I think that also is a possibility. You have to get a little lucky in there too, but it is possible,
indeed,
hopefully, for that to happen. So a couple quick things then just on this upcoming season now that we kind of completed all that. But I know I'm going to ask you, obviously, what you think the the ceiling for Penn State is this year. But what are some things, maybe outside, I know we just talked about coaching, but what are some things that you see possibly being issues to them reaching that ceiling?
Some issues that could prevent Penn State from reaching their ceiling, I think, looking at it from an outsider's perspective, is Aller. I understand that he has all of the tools to be amazing and elite, but the Josh Allen comparison out of high school is something that I don't even know if, like, the Venn diagram between those two players intersects at all. I don't.
I think maybe height and weight. That's might be about it.
Yeah, height, weight, arm strength, but mobility, no. At least, I mean, we don't know. Maybe he's continued, because last year he slimmed down a lot, and he was obviously more nimble than he was the prior year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that him being more mobile would really help in the Kotelnicki offense, which obviously prefers, dual threat guys. That's what he ran at Kansas. I think a lot of it, like personnel wise, would be Aller. And then maybe you could say maybe some of the concerns with safety depth or D-end depth. But I like the starting two guys at D-end, Fisher and Sutton, if they're healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And based on film, PFF grades, and Dion Barnes coaching, I really like the D tackle room. And I think that Harris and Washington are going to be awesome. And they have depth at corner. So I think it's really, as cliche as it is, I think a lot of it's the quarterback, honestly. And then maybe the mental fortitude of the players when things get tough. Where last year against Ohio State, the offense fails for the second time in the red zone, and it felt like the defense quit for the final 5 minutes. Or starting out in the Big Ten championship game, it felt like they got 100 yards of penalties in the first quarter, and that helped Oregon build a lead so that when Penn State finally got momentum, it was too out of grasp for the level of the team Penn State was.
Yeah, I definitely agree with both of those. That was the first time in a while, honestly, the end of that Ohio State game when the offense got stood up again. Pretty much everyone felt the same way, from the fans to the team. You could feel it. So that one, that is something I hope that they can avoid this year. And I think with a lot of guys coming back for, a quote unquote last dance type thing, that might not happen because they know there's really no other opportunity for them. So I'm kind of in a headspace where I hope that a lot of these guys, knowing this is their last shot, will prevent situations like that. And that wasn't a terrible black eye on the season, but it's just something that you'd like to not have happen again.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, think of Ohio State in 2023. Like, that team had no interest in playing against Missouri. I mean, I remember the video of Cade Stover trying to fire up people on the sidelines, and like the entire team is like, nope, not interested. We don't want to be here. And then Michigan the year before 2023, where like they beat themselves against TCU. There was this inconsistency with the team, especially at QB with McCarthy, where like you saw the highs, but you saw the floors. Like Ohio State and Michigan have shown that senior leadership and a good staff really produces dividends. And it actually does better than like Georgia, where Georgia, ever since their 15-0 year, they're more talented recruiting wise than Ohio State, certainly more so than Michigan and Penn State by a wide mile, but they don't retain seniority. Like you hit your junior year and you're good, you're off to the NFL. And it's, I think, kind of the same with Texas and a lot of those Southern schools. So I would say, yeah, you and Penn State fans everywhere should expect the team's mental and physical, even physical fortitude to be way stronger with all those guys coming back.
Definitely. So then, final question. I know I'm not saying predict that this is what's going to happen, but what do you really think is the ceiling for this team heading into this season?
The ceiling of this team is they're 16-0. They beat everyone by 10 points or more, and they're the best national champion since 2020 Alabama, or at least 2021 Georgia. That is the absolute everything works out in every way ceiling. Maybe even in that world, everything working out might even be better than that. But I want to at least have some level of realism. They
Right.
can go undefeated. They can run for like 5.5 yards per carry. And I think I said in one of my Penn State videos, I think this is a team that could do what Michigan did to Penn State in 23,
Yep.
where they ran for 34 times at the end of the game and just iced it. And I think this is also the team that if they need to, they could air it out with the receivers they have and convert long third downs and several of them. The ceiling of this team is incredibly high. I know that they don't recruit at the level that Texas, Georgia, Ohio State, or even Clemson have, but they have the best staff in America. I think they have the best coordinator duo by a mile and a half. And the intriguing thing too is if Aller plays at a round one, pick one level,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who stops that team. Like with Knowles on the other side, like having a potential generational NFL QB prospect like Matt Stafford was round one, pick one,
Mm-hmm.
and then pairing him with an OC and Kotelnicki and a DC and Knowles with a bunch of senior guys, many of whom are predicted to be either first round picks or day two picks, and who could play themselves into being first round picks. The ceiling's incredibly high. I mean, this team at the end of the year could be viewed as better than the Michigan and Ohio State teams who kind of paved the way for them, and better than the Georgia teams who came before them there.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. That is some pretty high praise. I mean, we're all hoping it could get to that point. It's something for a lot of Penn State fans that it would be a see it to believe it type situation. We're just hoping to get there at this point with the roster and the coaching staff they've put together for this season. But that was very insightful. It was awesome to hear your thoughts on everything. So Sam, thank you again for coming on the show. It was a lot of fun as always. And for everyone out there, we should be back probably sometime in early August to start talking about the season and going through the position groups. So you'll hear from us then. Thanks, everyone.